Hi guys, so your next quiz is going to be about patterns in evolution. So evolution is when a species of animals or plants or bacteria or insects or whatever changes over time. Its traits change over time, over a long period of time, because of natural selection. So natural selection is when the best adapted ones survive and they reproduce, and their offspring are also pretty well adapted, and the ones that are not well adapted, they die. They don't have a chance to reproduce usually, and then we don't have those ones anymore. So over time, the population changes because the best adapted ones survive, and then the population becomes better adapted. That's evolution, is when the traits change over time. We learned about cladograms, which are also called phylogenetic trees. Here's an example of a phylogenetic tree or a cladogram. This shows how these species are related in an evolutionary way, okay? So, for example, back here we've got their common ancestor, right? And then over time it split off into these groups based on which adaptations were helping them survive best in their environments. So, for example, which of these organisms have an amniotic egg? So we'd find where on the cladogram is the amniotic egg. It's right there. So that's when an amniotic egg evolved, right? All the species above that have an amniotic egg. So if we trace it up, dinosaurs and birds have got it, trace it up again, crocodiles have got it, trace it up again, what does that say? Rodents and rabbits have got it, and then trace it up, primates have got it, okay? So all of these 4 species have an amniotic egg because they're all above it in the cladogram, okay? We would never trace backwards, okay? We're always just going to trace forwards for those, okay? Another one, which of these species have 4 legs? Well, or 4 limbs. So we've got 4 limbs is right here, so now we're going to trace it up. Amphibians, and then of course it also goes up to these 4. So from amphibians over, all of those organisms have 4 limbs. Remember, we don't ever like trace it back. So these ones don't have 4 limbs, right? It's just the ones that are above it, okay? So that's how you read a cladogram. And it shows how they're related evolutionarily as well. So for example, dinosaurs and birds, probably more closely related to crocodiles, because do you see how they're on the same kind of branch here? Same with these 2. Rodents and rabbits, more closely related to primates, they're on the same branch, right? What does that say? The ray-finned fish, that's way farther away. It's not as closely related, because in order to trace it over here, we'd have to follow the path for a while, right? Whereas these 2, they're on the same branch, so they are more closely related. Their most common ancestor is more recent, right? They split off from each other more recently than the fish split off from them, okay? So that's cladograms, also called phylogenetic trees, okay? We have some other evidence for evolution, and we did a lot of stations with this. So here's one of the stations we saw. Look at all these limbs. We've got a bat wing, we've got a chicken wing here, this is a turtle, a dolphin, a human, and then this one is a horse limb. Something all these limbs have in common is they have similar bones, like they have the same bones, okay? So on a human, your bone, like where your bicep muscle is, that's called the humerus. You can see the dolphin has a humerus, it's just a different shape and size. So does the turtle, there's the turtle's humerus. So does the bat, I believe that one is the bat's humerus. So does the bird, okay? So they all have the same bones, and most of them have 5 fingers. We've got 5 fingers, so does the dolphin, 5-finger bones, even though they're all inside the fin, right? So does the turtle and the bat, right? The horse leg, you don't see 5 fingers, but that is because the horses have changed over time, and we talked about that in class as well. I'll show you a picture of that in a second. So because they all have the same bones in their limbs, even though they're different shapes and sizes, that gives us evidence that they come from a common ancestor. So I'm going to show you the phylogenetic tree again. Those limbs that I just showed you, the species they come from, they're not all in this tree, but that means they all had a common ancestor back here, and that common ancestor evolved and diversified and became different animals over time. But because they came from that common ancestor, they've got that basic foundation of those same bones. They've just adapted over time through evolution to whatever environment they're in, okay? So that's some evidence for evolution. I want to show you real quick just because it's cool. Here's my bat skeleton. You can see the bat's wing, it's got those bones, those same bones, just like your finger bones, okay? It's just, they're way longer than our finger bones, and that's because they've evolved over time for flight. That has helped them to survive better, so the ones that could fly were surviving better and reproducing, okay? So evolution. We had a common ancestor with bats, but it was a really long time ago, and we've both changed a lot since then. Okay, more evidence for evolution. We talked in class about whale skulls. You can see this is from 50 million years ago. This whale skull from that long ago has got nostrils on the front of its nose, right? And then 25 million years ago, the nostrils are in the middle of the skull. Today, modern whale skulls, they've got nostrils on the top of the head. That's better for them because they're able to breathe more easily. They don't have to stick their whole nose out of the water to breathe. They can just kind of poke up the top of their head, right? Also, when they're swimming, water's not rushing into their nostrils, okay? So this is evolution. They've adapted over time. The ones with the nostrils that were higher up survived better, and they passed on that trait, okay? So this is more evidence for evolution. Another one that we've talked about is the horse feet. This is an ancestor of horses. You can see it's got 4 toes, and then it progresses, and this is what a modern horse foot looks like. You can see that the middle toe, the 3rd toe, has gotten much longer and bigger, and the other ones have gotten smaller over time, right? Because they're running on their toes, they can run faster on their toes, and so if the other ones were smaller, if they were born with smaller side toes, they actually could run faster that way. They don't have to worry about those toes, right? And so they're able to run faster on just the one, okay? So that's more evidence for evolution. You also need to know something from, we talked about it in our adaptations unit. Carnivores usually have sharper teeth so they can tear into the meat, right? Herbivores, they eat plants, and they have teeth that are kind of like our molars. Your molars are kind of flat and they're good for grinding the plant material, okay? So carnivores, sharp teeth for tearing meat. Herbivores, kind of flat teeth for grinding up plant material, okay? Last thing you need to know, embryos. An embryo is a developing organism. It's still developing, it's not born yet, and it doesn't even look like the organism it's going to become, right? Check this out. Here's a human embryo. It doesn't even really look that much like a human. It looks very different. Same with the bird, the reptile, and the fish. I know this isn't a very good, it's not very dark, but hopefully you can still see it. None of them look quite like what they're about to become, right? Embryos, they're still developing, not born yet, okay? Some of the similarities between animals of all these species, even though the animals are very different, all these species as embryos, they've got gill slits and tails. That's more evidence for evolution because it shows that we all came from a common ancestor. All these animals, they had a common ancestor. I'm going to show you that cladogram again. And I know these are different animals, but let's say that the fish, the reptile, the bird, and the human, if they were all up here on the cladogram, they all have a common ancestor back here somewhere, right? And because of that, they have similarities as embryos, even though once they develop, they've got a lot of differences, right? So embryos are more evidence for evolution, okay? Yeah, I think that's everything that we need to review for the quiz. I hope that was helpful. Please ask me if you have any more questions, and good luck on the quiz.